Countrywide Connect with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perriam-Lamp.
Brad Olsen, who's walking past, our CEO for Infometrics. Brad, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to catch up. Hey, firstly, I saw you at Budget Week in Parliament. How was that in terms of all of the budgets you've covered before?
Fairly boring in a sense. There wasn't a lot happening. It was a great thing. And I think the biggest thing for me is it's an election year, right? And I was worried in a sense that government, who didn't have a lot of money to start with, might be trying to sort of splash the cash a little bit more, provide a whole lot of different options out for households, and they didn't. It was pretty limited. We called it the little B budget because it wasn't all that big. But I think what you did see was instead of giving households or businesses or industry a lot of money, instead you saw some of those fundamental investments into the likes of hospitals, into schools and education. That stuff was important.
Hey, you know how old mate Cameron Baggery called it the broccoli budget? Why don't you call it the Brussels sprout budget? It's the one thing that people don't really like eating, but they know they have to.
I don't know. I think that, I'm going to disagree, though, because I feel like I know a lot of people that do like Brussels sprouts when they're cooked properly.
Oh,
It's all about what you do with them.
Yeah, so that's the sizzle of the politicians to put a bit of bacon fat around the Brussels
sprouts. A little bit of olive oil and similar over the top. There's some good stuff.
Yeah, you do Brussels sprouts like that. Fantastic.
If you just boil them, I mean, nothing's
broccoli, though, I agree.
Yeah. But got to have the right option.
So, you're right about the infrastructure. We have a tendency to expect an election year bribes, right?
A lolly scramble.
Yeah.
A little bit, yep.
Yeah.
But instead, I think as well, I mean, some of the investments you've got coming through are important for local communities, but they're certainly not bribes. I mean, you saw, for example, a 158-bed hospital for Whangarei that's coming through, or another wing at least being added in. I've been to that hospital before. I've seen, and heard of stories where the window has fallen out from like the 5th story. It needs some work. So that was good. There's more investments coming for Tauranga, Palmerston North, Hawke's Bay for their hospitals. And one of the big ones is they're buying land now so that the future city around Drury and that sort of southern Auckland, northern Waikato area has something for the future. So that was all encouraging. Cambridge to Pairiri, a lot of good stuff coming through.
I like the Tākaka Hill that I do for my summer holidays is getting an upgrade, so that's good. So
Sophie report came out, $64.3 billion being generated by the ag sector, going up to, I think, $70 billion by 2030. Those numbers, you say them fast, they're extraordinary, aren't they?
They're big numbers. I mean, that growth that we've seen over the forecast for the year to June this year, so we're almost sort of through it. We've got most of the numbers in, up 6% year on year. Remembering again that was on top of the 13% growth the year before. Now, it had come off a bit, so it was a bit easier to recover that growth last year. It's gone further over the last 12 months. I think the big thing is it was fairly broad-based. You saw an extra, I think, $1.4 billion coming through for dairy, and we know that things have been in a good spot. 1.8 billion more though for meat, and that really shows that level of sort of supply and demand. At the moment, very, very good demand across the world, but supply pretty crimped, particularly into the US, so that's been a big part of it. And I think going forward, like there is this sort of feeling that most parts of the primary sector are in a solid spot. The difficulty is there's a couple that are under more pressure, the likes of arable. Forestry is also, in the doldrums a bit, with big cost pressures coming in from fuel. But even then, despite some of the sort of weird stuff that's happened overnight in terms of conflict in the Middle East, diesel still, now down below, I think, $3 a litre on average across the country. So there seems to be a little bit more of an optimistic tone showing through.
Hey, Brad, one thing I'm finding really interesting, just right across our entire economy, we can continue to talk about having growth that's productivity connected, not just migration or, say, commodity connected. The announcement yesterday around land use flexibility and the funding going into some of those things, I don't like to have a lot of opinion around who's doing good, but a lot of it was sensible stuff we've been talking and wanting for a while. You talked about forestry, actually doing onshore manufacturing, adding value to our logs, but pairing it with commercial government procurement can 7 times that log's value. The same with virtual fencing in the hill country. Does it mean now that we need to put forward driving that export growth more on the productivity for a sustainable sector as opposed to a volatile sector?
Yeah, well, and this is one that came up a lot at Soapy this morning. It's one of the points that I raised. I was asked by Ray Smith from MPI to sort of talk about this a bit more, is that, yes, there is that need for the sector almost trying to figure out what normal looks like, and that's clearly difficult in these volatile times. But it's more, how do you maybe stop as much volatility? You're never going to get rid of it. There's always going to be these weird and wonderful things that come out. We had tariffs last year. We have the Iran war this year. You've had more states of emergency so far this year than any other year in New Zealand's history. So like the pressure's on. But I think the big thing for the sector is also when you get a bit more of that consistency, you can start to invest a little bit more as well, because you know there's sort of a stronger payoff over time, rather than I'm going to put some investment in, but man, one bad year in the next 5 could completely sort of blow me out of the water. So that stuff's tough.
So, Brad, yesterday we had a fascinating interview, and I would like to talk to this guy more and more and more. The guy's name is Tim Ewing-Jarvie. He's the managing director of Horizon Labs. He basically said what we have got now, what we've had literally since COVID, although that was
the last 40 years.
He said, well, the last 60 to 70 years has been a very unusual and benign period. The disruption that we've got now, that we're living through with the tariffs and now with the war, the rules have changed. We have to accept this going forward. What do we do, or what do you guys, as economists, you look at it? Do you start to plan for this level of disruption?
In a sense, yes. I mean, how do you forecast it is our trouble. It's sort of hard to throw into the model who knows what. But increasingly, effectively, where that shows through is that your expected growth rates aren't quite as high. You previously thought you might get 4% a year. Now you only get 2%, because in every given year, you might get a 4% every now and then, but you might also get a 0. And so you sort of have to average through the middle, which does sort of, it limits your productive capacity in that growth going forward. So yes, it's challenging. It's very much in line, though, with what you've heard from Vangelis from MFAT, who's talked about the sort of golden era of trade being over. Despite that, though, you look at where New Zealand's exports have gone, the lift in say, the EU and UK trade figures are really strong. Sounds like we've got a good boost with the UAE recently. So, like, those partnerships are important, and I think we're still pretty well regarded. I just think we can't as easily grow in some of those other areas or other markets where it's just a little bit more topsy-turvy. And so the focus here has got to be, one, how do we make sure that those who we are strongly partnered with, we keep strongly partnered with? 2, we find as many other friends as possible over time. But 3, we just really double down on the value piece, because around the world, what you're still seeing from people is, like you or lump you, they're still very keen if you've got good stuff to send them. And that's where I think our advantage still comes.
Yeah, absolutely. And who knows how this Indian free trade agreement will transpire into value. It may see another golden era if it's anything to follow the Chinese FTA.
It'll be slower, and I think that's okay. I think we've just got to recognise that, you know, like as quickly as India has come up in terms of population and similar, Indian GDP per capita is still nowhere near where China is, nor was even in the past. Much slower sort of uptick. It's more that you do have so many people, and so the opportunity is there, but it speaks also, I think, to the maturing of New Zealand's trade profile, where we've got a lot of these agreements, we've got a lot of good activity. It's then about expanding and pushing forward on both what we're providing and also the level where we're doing it. What's really, I think, been encouraging personally to look out across the primary sector is where you see some of those innovations, or more tailoring what products we're sending into market and making sure they work for the markets we're sending them to. Yesterday I was drinking some protein drink that we now apparently New Zealand whey and similar goes into over in the US rather, and again, like that's basically a meal replacement now when you've got GLP-1s and everything else coming through. That protein focus is huge. When I was in China last year, we saw crayfish flavoured cheese, which is sort of...
Really?
You and I probably wouldn't eat it.
No.
But I tell you what, they were lapping it up, and it got me that, again, we're good at cheese, we're good at dairy products, but we were making them context specific, which really seemed to hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, that's so true. Absolutely. Brad, thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to having you in studio in Christchurch next time you're down as well.
Looking forward to it.
That would be
Wonderful.
fantastic.
Thanks, Brad.
Countrywide Connect with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perriam Lamp.